Hi, everyone. So, today I want to continue what I was talking about last week when I spoke about what I call the three waves of medicine. The first wave was indigenous medicine, or what I call the science of experience. And today I want to talk about the second wave, which is the science of experiment. Very, very different. And how did this happen? Well, obviously, what happened was that as people tried to understand more and more about the nature of reality, what it was to be human, how to fix ill health, in order to do that, what happened was that they started to reduce to what can be measured, because that was somehow gave them a sense of power then. Because what can't be measured, and therefore it's kind of slips out of the sense of reality. So what scientists started to do was try to reduce reality to a box within which everything was held, everything was known, everything was measured, and they could then work it out exactly what was going on. So in order to do that, there was a number of things that they started to do very quickly, and that was to remove the subjective. Because the subjective is subjective. And everybody's subjective reality is different, and you can't get hold of it. You can't put it into a laboratory. You can't even measure it directly. So the subjective world was excluded, and only the objective world, which can be held and measured and seen and agreed upon, that was exactly where they went. So subjective was out. And what were they reducing? Now, that was fine if they wanted to send a spaceship to the moon. They needed to know all the objectivity that they could. And there they were in charge. They were creating a machine. They knew exactly what was put into the machine. And so they felt that they could handle that. But when it came to the human being, there we started to run into serious problems, unless we left out all the subjective. So if we reduce the human being to another machine model, a very sophisticated and complex machine, but nevertheless a machine, then they could start to get a handle on what was going on. And so that's where they went. They started to take the human body, because that could be weighed, could be measured, temperature could be taken. They started to take it apart and look inside it, and look for what they call the basic building blocks. And so the human being actually became a machine model. They had the machine, the sophisticated machines, and the human being became just another sophisticated machine. And first they broke the machine apart, and then they developed the so-called anatomical picture of the human being. And then they went deeper into the matter part of it, and then they developed physiology and biochemistry, and they could measure all the little bits and pieces, and they divided up into different organ systems, sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, the brain, the heart, the kidneys. All of them became different parts of the machine. And so the human being became a machine model and treated like a machine model. And then it was easy to identify diseases in the body, and then see how they could shift the disease, either by removing it and replacing it, the part if they could, and just as they would a machine that was broken down. And then they had all the physiological, biochemical components which moved around the body, and they learned slowly by using, they couldn't always remove the biochemical processes, but they could do chemical surgery with drugs, as it were, by blocking and interfering with certain functionalities in order to treat the symptoms and signs. So surgery and drugs, which were doing kind of the similar thing, where you're removing an organ or blocking the organ function with drugs, is not dissimilar. And so that's what they did. And that was the conventional medical model. What did they leave out in that whole model? They left out the subjective. And what makes a human being human? is the subjective components, the feeling, the emotions, thinking processes, the ability to have an experience. Machines don't actually have experiences. So they could think, they could feel, and all that was kind of sidetracked. And the focus was on the body and the physiology and the way they could manipulate the body's chemistry and change that part of it. So that's what happened. And that's how slowly medicine moved from a more holistic feeling place, the way indigenous knowledge was, and the science of experience. Experience was, as I mentioned before, Chinese medicine is thousands of years old, with hundreds, if not thousands, of textbooks on the way this experiential process could work. But modern medicine cut that off completely, removed all the kinds of healing techniques that were related to indigenous knowledge, because it was subjective. They didn't want anything to do with it, unless somehow they could subject it to proper science. And the whole framework of medicine collapsed into what I call flat earth science. Flat earth science because it's flat earth, it's based on measurements, seeing the human being as a machine, dealing with a human being as a machine. And so eventually we don't need even doctors. We can have computers and AI to make a diagnosis. And the AI will then suggest protocols based on all this background of information that it has, and make it much easier. People can come in, sit in a room, and have an interview with AI. That's where, in a way, it could have gone. And maybe even now, there is a lot of movement towards doing that because it's becoming too expensive, hospital practice in the way, and if it can all be computerized, and the computer can do surgery even today, diagnosis, they say, is better with AI. So you can see where this conventional modern medicine science of experiment is taking us. Yeah, so it dehumanizes us in a kind of way by making us into a machine and leaving out everything that is human. And even, remember, even the scientists, they're not even allowed to say in their scientific papers that they had an inspiration or they have a feeling about the science. They don't talk about that part of it. They only talk about what they measure and the outcome. They don't. The writing is as if it's no one there. Is a computer doing the writing in a kind of way. They don't say, I thought or I feel and this is the direction I wanted to go. No. It's all matter of fact and straight down the line. That's a scientific paper. You wouldn't believe that there was anybody, a human being behind that paper doing the research and having the inspiration. So that's where modern medicine has taken us. And next week I'm going to be talking about the third wave, where experience and experiment come together. Till next week.